Greetings, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 29 with Tyler Miller. A lot of good stuff in this conversation. A little bit of a longer episode, but promise it is worth it. Tyler is another member of the kind of Geek Ed family that's been really collaborating with the partnership with San Diego Comic-Con to do panels over the last several years, centering on kind of the intersections of education and geekdom, representation in media, all those sorts of things. So I'm really excited to continue this conversation. I'm linking to the other episodes of Geek Ed members that we've done so far in the show notes. So definitely check out those episodes if you've not already. They are all awesome. But Tyler has a really unique story and really kind of just tenured career in higher ed, and is just a proper geek as usual. And we share some geek outs about Star Wars and Avengers and all that good stuff. So a lot of fun and a lot of good morsels to chew on here, and some cool stuff to check out that we mentioned in the episode. So just get ready to dig in. And after this brief message from our sponsor, this is episode number 29 with Tyler Miller. Hey there, listeners. It's an honor to have our good friends at SwiftKick be a sponsor of the podcast, because I've seen their work firsthand, and it's truly unlike any student leadership training I've experienced. They've been voted Best Student Leadership Program unprecedented 5 times, so you know they must be doing something right. As a bonus for our listeners, SwiftKick is giving a $500 discount off their normal speaking fee if you mention Higher Ed Geek when you contact them. I highly recommend their trainings for your campus, as your students will be talking about it for months afterwards. It's really great stuff. Check them out, swiftkickhq.com, to learn more, and let them know I sent you. Now, back to the show. Yeah, how is everything going? I assume you're probably wrapping up the semester here soon, if not already.
No, we're quarter system.
Oh, yeah.
So I've got another month to go.
Yeah. Yeah, because we have I guess it's essentially like a quarter system. I don't really call it that, but for 2U and our partner program with American University, their MBA program, it's 10-week modules, and they have 3 weeks off in between each. So we just started our last one at the beginning of April, and then it'll so we're sort of the halfway point. So we're done mid-June, and then start back up again in July. So they go all year long, but it's just it's still kind of new to me, and our students get confused. And since we're still a pretty new program, nothing else exists like us at the university, so it's also kind of quirky that way too. I guess, I assume maybe you've worked at campuses that were not quarter systems. Do you have a preference?
Oh, I much prefer semester than quarter. I do not like the quarter system. I think for relationship building, it feels so much more surface, because you only got 10 weeks and then you're off, and 10 weeks you're off, versus the grind of doing a 16-week semester. I just feel like you just get deeper, and there's more opportunity to have relationship, So yeah. I'm a big fan of the semester.
Yeah, because I always say with my students, if they're either having a good time or a bad time, it's just our modules, for better or worse, go very quickly. So if you're in a really hard course, it'll be over soon. Or, if things are going well, it's things are moving right along, and you're just kind of cruising through your classes. It's tough. It can be tough that way. And then for us, just because we're on all 4 quarters, just for students persisting, they'll just sometimes I just need to slow down, or I just need to take a module off. So, just hard, for us sometimes to forecast, how many students are we going to have, each module. But, I can see how that might be tough, because it's just kind of this roller coaster where it's okay, we're on for 10 weeks and then you're off, and then, it's just kind of always going versus the more, I guess you could say traditional, time frame. But, I guess I don't even because I've never been on a campus proper that had, a quarter system. So I don't know what it feels like that way.
Just we're opening, we're grinding, and then we're closing, and then we're opening, then we're grinding, then we're closing, then we're opening. It's just, I much prefer the semesters.
Yeah. So. Cool. All right. Well, I'm sure we maybe will talk about some of your experience and stuff here. So we'll go ahead and dive in. And we will kick off the episode here as we always do. If you just want to introduce yourself in kind of the Cliff Notes version of how you got to be where you are today, and then we'll dig in with a couple of pieces of your story a little bit more deeply.
As somebody who has lived for 46 years, the Cliff Notes version is still kind of long, so I'll give you a shorter version.
Sure, yeah.
I grew up on the East Coast, born in Milford, Connecticut, moved to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania when I was 5. My first experience working on a campus is when I went to boarding school my junior year of high school. My father passed away when I was 15. And so I went to a Quaker boarding school outside of Philadelphia, and it was really my first on-campus living experience. And so I think it was very unique for me in high school as a junior and a senior to live on campus, and really was a transformative experience for me. When it was time for college, I wanted to go as far away from home as I could. And so California called me, and came out to California in 1990 and went to UC Santa Barbara for my undergrad. Really is where I kind of did my undergrad, became RHA president, became an RA, then became an ARD. I graduated, did an ARD for another year. I'm assistant resident director. And then I moved to Chico, California, where I was a resident director there. And that's kind of where I kind of got my master's degree, in social science. I did my undergrad at UCSB and I got a double major, a double BA in math and communications. So I think that's really unique. I wanted to be a talk show host is what I wanted to do when I went to college, but I got kind of sucked into the student affairs realm at my first NACUR in 1991. I went there was a career student affairs lunch, and you do those things with students and you never think, oh, it's really going to make a difference. Well, I'm here because Chuck Rhodes spoke at that lunch and said you could do this as a career, and that's kind of the rest is history. So worked at Chico State for about 4 years, got my master's degree in social science. I took a year off after that to teach junior high. I thought maybe if I could get these students earlier, I could have more of an impact on them, because there were students who I was like, I can't impact them. It's already too late. And so I taught junior high. I also volunteered as a morning sidekick at a local radio station, and quickly decided I'd much rather deal with drunk college students than sober junior high kids. I have no disrespect. I think for me, the junior high teachers out there, I could not do that. It is an amazing job. And it was the limit of what I could accomplish. And I quickly decided I'd come back and go working in colleges. I went back to Chico State for 2 more years. I took another year off while my wife graduated from Chico State. And I ran a homeowners association, which was interesting. I went from confiscating alcohol from 18-year-olds to managing a bar for senior citizens. And so I bought alcohol and provided bartenders, and it was a really interesting dynamic for a year. And then I went to work at Sonoma State with Chuck Rhodes. That's why I mentioned his name. So I worked at Sonoma State, and that's kind of where I tell people I got my master's degree at Chico, but I really got my graduate level student affairs education at Sonoma State. Unofficially, Chuck Rhodes, Cindy Morizumi really are the two people who really influenced me a lot in terms of the field. I then left, spent 9 months at CSU Stanislaus as a res life coordinator, and then the opportunity to step into an assistant director role at Fresno State opened up, and kind of that's where I was for about 8 years. My wife and I had 5 kids, all girls, 5 daughters. While we were at Fresno State. And about 2.5 years ago, I got the opportunity to kind of come home a little bit back to UC Santa Barbara as an assistant director, kind of a bigger department. I got to open new residence halls. I got to work with family student housing. I got undergrad apartments. I got first-year residence halls all in my area. So I was like, okay, let's go back to Santa Barbara. And so I've been in Santa Barbara for the last 2.5 years, where we just recently welcomed our 6th daughter into the world in February. So what you need to know about me is I'm a family person. Most of my time is spent with my family. I am a geek at heart. I collected baseball cards and comic books as a kid. I'm really bummed that when I moved out to California, I sold everything and kicked myself every day that I sold those things because I didn't want to move out west with them. But that's kind of where I grew up on the East Coast, and then came out here, and kind of that's my kind of journey to get me to this place. There's other stuff along the way, but I think we'll talk about those as we go.
Yeah. Well, yeah, just so like pieces of that, just I seem to have an affinity, I think, for people that, I don't know, it's funny, just like have the respect for education and like give it a shot, but find higher ed as I think a better fit for them. Like I actually, was one of those people where I got, I guess, maybe very close to it. I got on the precipice of it that I was a history ed major all the way up until my final year of undergrad. And that's when I made the sort of decision to be like, okay, I'm going to take the GRE, apply to grad schools, go the higher ed route. And because my final year was going to be consumed by student teaching and even just observing, and just like, it was just what I sort of rolled into. Like I had really great history teachers in undergrad, and I was like, I would love to do that. I love history. I love putting things into context and that structure. So that's sort of a perspective I still have today, but, I think that respect for education is just at the core, I think, for some people. And it's good when they can find an environment, like a campus or even just sort of like a higher ed adjacent role, where they're still able to impact the student experience that way. And then, I don't know, just, there's other interesting experiences you've had too, which I'm sure, like they've given you something, but obviously weren't part of your like career trajectory. They sort of just were like kind of in the tie-dye of kind of like your broader kind of base career in higher ed. So it's always cool to hear those things too.
Yeah, and the other cool thing, going back to the education piece, I think for me, is we homeschool. So my wife actually stays home and she homeschools. So she gets kind of that classroom education piece. And I get to do that too. Because as a math major, my wife, we're kind of the perfect match. She was an English major. I was a math major and a communications major. So for me, I get to help our kids kind of do their math and engage with them, and take real world principles and kind of talk about how they relate to math education. So I still get to do that, and that's very exciting. And we're actually part of a charter school. And I know that's I have a lot of friends and colleagues who work in the K through 12 system, but I think for us, it works. And it's, we value both the public school education system and I think the opportunity for us in terms of what's best for our family. But it's nice that I get to still be a part of that, but with my own kids.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. I could imagine that almost kind of like scratch a little bit of an itch that way of just like, that's in you, and being able to utilize it to impact your own children is like amazing, just to like give back in that very direct way. And we will certainly talk about all the geeky stuff too, but yeah, it's cool really to see like that tapestry of, kind of your life and the things that you've done and that you like hold important. And I guess specifically, because I guess that connects with like kind of your undergrad college experience. So what, what specific details of like being an RHA, being an RA, anything like that, like what did that give you personally and or professionally that, kind of carries with you today?
Yeah, I think for me, what and really I think why I stick to housing a lot, or have stuck to housing, is because my life was saved, and I mean that in the most literal and metaphorical sense, from my on-campus living experience at college. I think for me, coming 3,000 miles away, I lived on campus at a Quaker boarding school, and I was in a rough time. My father passed away. My mom wasn't doing well with her mental health, and these people became my family and were my source of well-being and health. And that, when I came to UCSB, that's what I found. I found mentors and father figures, and everyone from the maintenance custodial person who picked glass out of my foot because I decided I wanted to walk barefoot for the first 3 months while I was at UCSB and not wear shoes for some reason, as an 18-year-old kid on his own for the first time.
Yeah.
I found family and I found healing living on campus for me. And so I think for me, there's that personal connection to that. I also I am still an alcoholic. I had a real big problem with alcohol as a first year student, to the point I did some things that I, not thrilled with, but had a resident assistant who really just got me connected to resources on campus. And so for me, the on-campus living experience, the college experience was life changing and transformative. And so for me, when I come into contact with the students and even the RAs, I look at my role as a part of their journey, as being somebody who could, as I heard when I was an RA, I have the ability to be a dream maker or a dream breaker. And I think for me, I want to be the dream maker. I want to help students live their dreams. I want to give them resources and support to be able to do the things they need and want to do that they may not even have the ability to do or have the resources to do today. And so for me, that's really what it gave me. It was my family, and continues really to be my family in a lot of ways. I think I deal with some jealousy of people who've been my family as I've, over the last 10 years, have started having kids of my own and having my own, biological family. There's a lot of, cognitive dissonance within me in navigating that too as a parent. But I think for me, the university experience was transformative for me. And so for me, I really feel connected. And I think that's why it's so hard for me to say, I'm going to go do, student activities, or I'm going to go do, and not to say those things are bad or advising, because I love those things, but I get to do those things in housing. But I think for me, I've not still let go of what housing did for me and what people in housing did for me. And again, I think for me, it's kind of like I want to pay it back. I'm a fan of, I think one of my favorite movies is Saving Private Ryan. And, for me at the end, when Tom Hanks, spoiler alert, if you've never seen Saving Private Ryan, but spoiler alert, Tom Hanks at the end, is dying, and he tells Private Ryan, earn this. And I think for me, for the people who built into my life and took serious risk, I look back and I put myself in their shoes and I'd say, I would never have done that, because I know for me, like how I navigate this field. I'm like, I don't think if I were you and, there was a student me, I don't think I would have done what you did for me, given what I know now and given the liability and risk management. And so for me, I think for me, this work we do is not a job. It really is, for lack of a better term, and I know it's a loaded term, it really is a ministry for me. It really is it's a life's calling in my mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you kind of sharing all that you did there. And yeah, like it's hard to quantify. Yeah, like that kind of like paying it back of like, when that would ever be enough, because yeah, it was such a transformative and deep change. And like, who knows where you would be without those people who, cared and reached out and supported you. And, I think, in that moment, they obviously weren't thinking like, oh, this person's probably going to like go and work at a college and go help somebody else. Like they were just doing it because it was the right thing to do. They were there. They were equipped with the right knowledge and tools and things to be able to help people in need. And, just like empowering and motivating and inspiring people to, live up to that ideal. Cause yeah, like when you are working in housing, you're dealing with people's whole lives, good, bad, and ugly. And, just helping them to have community, to have fun together and make memories, but also, through those hard times to help them do what they, should be doing, need to be doing to be healthy and well, and, build sort of a foundation for the rest of their lives, like you were able to get. And, like you said, that's just sort of where you were kind of born and bred, was in, housing and residence life. So it's like, yeah, you can kind of augment yourself with great partnerships across campus and all those other functional areas. But, it's just really important for you to have that direct experience to give back to, other students who, may be in a similar position that you were in. And I think, cause those stories always kind of warm my heart, where, in certain instances, people can be more focused on, obviously it would have like a very detrimental effect for you if they were more focused on like getting you in trouble and being punitive, versus like, okay, this person's in need, let's get them the help that they deserve, and, just kind of respect their dignity as a person, and not just be like, oh, like if you were like underage, or where did you get that alcohol, or what were you doing? Like you shouldn't have done that, and just sort of like wagging the finger, and it's like, oh no, I feel like, awful. So it's just like, yeah, like those weird things where, we don't give up on people just because they might make a bad choice. We help them to do better. So yeah, that's great.
And I also think it's why I've resisted becoming a director, because I think for me, I've been in the field 24 years and I'm still just the assistant director. And I think for me, I'm starting to explore the director level positions a little bit, but I think for me, I love being close to the students. I love being able to have the freedom to engage with the resident assistants, to meet with students. And I think I've resisted a little bit kind of moving forward because I've loved it so much. I think that, people are always asking me, like, how are you still an assistant director, Tyler, with all this experience? Like, well, part of it is I've resisted it. And part of it is, there are other things that go into that in terms of, my style a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I've heard that from a lot of people. Yeah, that, sometimes they might find a really great fit role and campus size and sort of, institution and sort of their philosophy that, you could probably find a place that, really, like where you'd be at a director level and, it would be the right style for you and the right balance to be able to have, time with your family and like those important things that like, it's like good on you for like, like not sacrificing, things just for the title. Cause I think I certainly have gotten distracted by the bright, shiny. And I think, a great quote that somebody told me one time, it's just, and, very simple, is like, ego takes us down a path that's not us. It kind of draws us away from, I think, our core values, more often than not. So, that's, it's like, because, it's good. Like, if you're in a position to be kind of like, picky and like, make sure you make that choice when it's, the right time and the right place and the right role. But I guess, like explore that a little bit more. You've made the willing decision to, be where you are now, like what is it, if you just want to just kind of, dig a little bit deeper, just like what do you enjoy most about your current work and, just kind of talk more about that.
Yeah. And, I think for me, it comes down to what I've really enjoyed is just mentoring and engaging professionals. I think to me, I love students. And again, like I talked about, the student experience is formative, but I think for me, I'm in the unique position of really, in my mind, developing my future bosses. I look at the folks I'm supervising and I look at them and I say, you will be my boss in 10 to 15 years if things go well. And I love the idea of being able to really shape the next generation of directors of housing and, senior student affairs officers. Because I'm a firm believer in the process. I love and believe I have an impact on people. And at the end of the day, I'm a big fan of, Aston's social change model. And so I really do believe I can impact and change the world. And again, I'm an idealist. And I think that sometimes gets challenging because I look at the ideal. You mentioned like our stated values versus our lived values. And for me, my entire day is spent questioning whether or not I'm living out my stated values. And so I think for me, I'm very idealistic and values driven, and outcomes driven, right? Like if we say this is important to us and I see where it's not, I'm going to engage and talk about that. So I am a problem solver. And again, I think in my current position, I learned a lot of this in my 8 years at Fresno State. I get to be the problem solver. I get to be the one who builds and develops a program. And then my boss, who is the director, gets to be the one to help me navigate the politics and the landmine of the campus to be able to get what we want to move our department in the direction we want to go. And so to me, I love that. I'm very strategic. I love strategic planning. I led WACUHO is the Western Association of College and University Housing Officers, their strategic planning process. Mm-hmm. I served the last 2 years as president. We created the Task Force on Equity and Inclusion. And so for me, I'm very strategic. I currently at UCSB worked on and led the Living Learning Community strategic planning process. So for me, I get to do those things. And so I think for me, it's comfortable. And I think that's where, for me, I'm starting to go, okay, maybe some of this is my comfort and as Brene Brown says, you need to dare greatly, and she's really challenged me in terms of reading, books from her and hearing her keynote at ACPA a few years ago. That maybe some of this is because this is what I'm comfortable with. It's time for me to take a risk. And running for president of Wakuho, I think really put me in touch with I can do it. It's just a matter of whether I want to or whether the opportunity presents itself where I won't have to sacrifice my family. I think for me, that's why and what I love about what we do.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's good that you have not just that student interaction that you crave, but also, that mentoring aspect, that involvement in the field at sort of a broader scale. And it's just the kind of good, again, sort of just mosaic of experiences where, I think you are well positioned to figure out like what is next. But you can, because I think for me, it's like sometimes people do, they want to take like a broad, giant leap in a position like this, but you can take on as much risk as you want, as quick as you want, kind of thing. And just like, again, be picky, take your time, plan, strategize as you've been doing, and kind of, set yourself up to kind of make that leap and have a soft landing versus, having to have it be like a stressful thing and have it be, an enjoyable process. But, that's, I guess, I think a lot in terms of just like your professional world, kind of the things that you geek out about that you've been doing, why, you love residence life and have really, made that your career thus far. And you said you're, just a proud geek at heart. So what are those things, just sort of like kind of conceptually, because we can, get into like recommending specific stuff to check out a little bit later, but like just sort of classically, like what are the things that you geek out about, the things that you have kind of in your world now? Is it stuff that you've discovered recently or stuff you've always been into? Just try to kind of paint that picture for us.
And it's interesting, obviously, as you can tell, I geek out about housing and student affairs a lot. That's probably one of my biggest things that you can hear about, in terms of a lot of my learning and knowledge. The podcasts, I recently, Dr. Jonathan Higgins, he's starting a new podcast called Learnt. And so for me, I've been geeking out about that. I've been geeking out about issues of social justice and inclusion, but that's not really, I think, what you're asking. Having 6 kids, a lot of my geeking out has to overlap with my children. So right now it's funny, the thing that I'm spending most of my time on is my 2 oldest daughters and I have been spending many evenings the past month playing WWE 2K17 on our PlayStation 4. And so professional wrestling right now, surprisingly, at this point in my life, has been one of the things I've been geeking out about a lot. They love it. We do matches. They want to do a Royal Rumble or an Elimination Chamber. And so it's just fun geeking out with them. And, one of the cool stories was, my 6-year-old watches. She's not ready to play yet. And for the longest time, she just thought we were playing a video game. And then my 8-year-old was practicing her entrance of one of the wrestlers, Becky Lynch. And so we turned on a video on YouTube, and my 6-year-old was blown away. She's like, "Wait, Daddy, these are real people?" And so for me, I love seeing stuff like that. And so for my 6-year-old, she's like, "I want to go see them. I want to be them." And so it was interesting because for her, this was a video game. It was never wrestling. And so I think for me, that's one of my big things. Obviously, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been big in our house. We finally, in January, introduced our kids to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We've been holding off just for different reasons. And so we just started, on a weekly basis watching all the movies. So that way, when Infinity Wars came out, we were ready for it. And so I don't know if we're ready to talk about that. I know there's spoilers ahead, but I think for us, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been big in our house right now. My daughter is really into Spider-Man. And so that's been interesting as somebody who, when you ask me, Tyler, what are your geek things? My top 2 things are Batman. Lego Batman is probably my favorite Batman movie. Kevin Conroy is my Batman. And so, for me, it's all about Batman. And then Star Wars. I mean, Batman and Star Wars, if you look at my office, as you look around, you're going to see a lot of, and I'm looking around right now. You can't see that. A lot of Batman, a lot of Star Wars. And so I think for me, those are at the top. Um, what's interesting though for me lately is because of my daughter's passions, we've been starting to do things like go to the comic book store. So I've started taking her to the comic book store, and that's kind of reintroduced me to some comics. So I've been reading, I just finished Miles Morales, Spider-Man, and so the graphic novel. And so I really enjoyed that. I'm just starting the Coates Black Panther series. I'm really excited about the Captain America series coming out by Coates on July 4th. So it's been probably 15 to 20 years since I've had a pull. And so I started my first pull again, for July. And so I think having that and trying to get my daughter into the habit of going to the comic book store and doing a pull, she's pulling Spider-Man. And so I think for her, that's been her jam. And my 8-year-old is into Star Wars adventures. And so I think, those are kind of the things when I have time. I'm trying to finish Rebels, the cartoon, the Star Wars cartoon. I've made it through season 1, but again, it's all about, I have very limited time. So yeah. I think for me, those are my current geek out moments. When it gets back to Star Wars, one of the things I got to say is like my favorite Star Wars movie is The Last Jedi. I think it is almost the perfect movie today. That could change based on the next movie coming out because it could go in a direction that makes me upset over The Last Jedi. It could go in a direction that makes me think it's even more brilliant than it currently is. But I'm a big fan of The Last Jedi. I think it's the perfect Star Wars movie at the moment. I know that's controversial, but there's a lot of good reasons behind it. We could probably do a whole podcast on why I think it's the perfect Star Wars movie.
Yeah. And I think it just fits in a very interesting place because it's almost like, to me, the way that I interpreted it, because I'll try to keep myself short here, but it was almost sort of like meta about like kind of the fandom around it or something of just sort of like, getting ready for kind of the new generation, the next generation and all that, because like, certain characters or, the whole galaxy at that point is still kind of dealing with, the Empire and the legacy of the Skywalkers and everything, but just sort of like, I don't know. Very.
It was mind blowing.
Yeah, like it's good because it's controversial. Like a Star Wars movie being controversial is good. Like gets people talking.
They could ruin it. They could certainly ruin it in the next movie. There's no doubt. There's opportunity to ruin it. But to me, like you said, it was made the biggest cliffhanger of the movie. What are they going to do with Carrie Fisher? Mm-hmm. I mean, how do you make a movie where the cliffhanger is real life? Like the question that was on everybody's mind, after The Force Awakens, everybody had all these questions, right? And they were all character driven. The only question on people's mind after The Last Jedi, how are they going to do Princess Leia with Carrie Fisher's passing? Like what an homage to her that would be the question. And when Yoda burned down the tree, he wasn't burning down the Jedi Order. He was burning literally Star Wars to the ground. And and look, my generation, and I don't know how old you are, but like for us, Luke Skywalker is Star Wars. And his passing was for us, I think, the death of our childhood. And I think we were holding on to that for a really long time. And it was getting in the way of the future. And I think it's a perfect analogy for where we are at as a society. I think it's a perfect analogy of where we are at as a student affairs field. I think it's a perfect analogy of where we are at as a country, that we are blocking ourselves and our future because we won't let go of the past. And I think for me, it sent a message, and it was the first Star Wars movie that actually had a message since The Return of the Jedi. The first 3 movies, they were good and I liked them, but sorry, I'm going way off here, but
go for it.
Science fiction at its best is designed to tell stories that make us think and push society, that are less threatening than talking about them directly. And so when I think of like Planet of the Apes and Star Trek, they were ways to tell stories you and I couldn't have a conversation about because they were too risky and too scary. But because of science fiction and the landscape, we could have those conversations. And in Star Wars, they did that. But I think when they did the new movie, the Phantom Menace and stuff, it was about selling tickets. And they had to do The Force Awakens because there is no way they could have started off with The Last Jedi. People would have been out of their minds had that been the first movie. And so I feel like The Force Awakens was dealing with white male fragility. It was a way to get us ready in our fragility so that they could start a new hope. And I really think The Last Jedi is a new hope. It is the new hope for the future to set the landscape forward. Sorry, you could tell these are my geek out things. And so we're talking about them. But for me, that's why I love The Last Jedi.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't wait to like rewatch it. I usually don't see the movies in theaters like multiple times just because like, I don't know, just like making time for it. But if I can like cozy up and just like watch it at home and sometimes like watch the commentary and like watch the deleted scenes and like all the stuff around it, you know, that helps me to process versus having to like kind of make the trek out to the theater. But yeah, I mean, it's I just appreciate it for its boldness and just charting a new path. And I think, I mean, I agree with everything that you've said about like sci-fi and all that. And just like, I mean, it's kind of what the franchise needed. And, you know, I think they have certainly a tendency to just like, you know, I mean, a lot of like the Marvel stuff is always tempted by that dark pool of just like, you know, do the things to sell the toys or make money, you know, just kind of cash grabs and stuff. But thankfully they always balance it with, you know, enjoyable movies still. But
and I think you see that a little bit with Infinity War, right? We don't have to talk about it. I don't know if you want to talk about it, but I mean, to me, Infinity War told a story. And I think it has the potential to be an amazing benchmark for the series. They could destroy it in a heartbeat in the next movie easily, you know. And I think that's what's scary. And I think that to me it's like, where are they going to go with this? What is the message they're going to send? Because right now the message is, you know, there's a certain message that if they take it and basically just, like they could write, it was just all a dream, right? And then people are like, what? Like, but there was a message to it. And I think it was a hard message, you know, and I think for me, that to me it was brilliant. I think, say what you want about Disney, they have done a really good job with the Marvel properties and Star Wars properties.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, they make good movies. They know how to tell a good story. So, you know, you can always give them that credit. But I guess, you know, you mentioned, you know, you're sharing sort of interest with your children. So certainly that's a way that these kind of geek outs have been positively contributing to your life. I guess anything else, maybe even like, you know, through your college experience or like early career and just like your early life before that, or just kind of ongoing more on that personal level, and like any other ways that you want to mention, just like how these hobbies and interests that have been so pervasive and, you know, kind of deep for you, like how have they positively contributed to your life in terms of like community or anything like that?
Well, they certainly got me on a panel at San Diego Comic-Con, and they give me free tickets to San Diego Comic-Con every year. I'll tell you that. I mean, I think, you know, you've been a part of that. I think that's really it's really exciting. You know, for me, a lot of it started around, you know, creating Geek Ed with Ryan McCrae. You know, we've been doing some amazing work connecting with colleagues from across the country, really bridging the geek identity and the work we do in higher education student affairs. And so I think the idea of opening this up and saying, where could we help college students use this to work for them? Where could we help staff members use this to work for them, instead of creating this dichotomy where my geek life has to stay somewhere and then my work life is over this other side? And so I think for me, that's been one of the most exciting things to just see take off. And so now Ryan and I have stepped back and other people have taken it on, and they're doing amazing things. They're doing panels at San Francisco Comic-Con. They did a panel at WonderCon, you know, so I think it's just fun to kind of just sit back and kind of let other people kind of take it. And again, taking it further than we could ever have imagined. But I think to me, and again, what I always love about our work with Geek Ed is we've had the opportunity over the years to get about 80 to 90 higher ed student affairs professionals and students to their first ever San Diego Comic-Con. And I think for me, that's what I love about it. It's getting people connected. And so I think for me, that's been the biggest kind of combination of my geek pop culture and my practice. I've done research with Geek college students and looking at, intersections of identity with that, like our women Geek students, our Black Geek students, our LGBT Geek students, doing some research around that. I led, when I was at Fresno State, efforts with our students, faculty, and staff to create the first ever Fresno State Comic-Con, FresCon, and that's exciting because for this weekend actually is going to be their 4th year, and when we did that, we had 1,500 people our first year. Our second year, there was 4,000. And so for me, being able to combine, and say, oh, you have a programming budget, you can put on a Comic-Con, what? Like, to me, that's amazing. Right. And I think there was this untapped potential out there in higher ed and student affairs that I think people were afraid to really engage in, but have seen the power of that. And it's, it started for me with, you and I have talked about this and on a different podcast, but, it started with Magic the Gathering, right? I got a random call, Wizards of the Coast said, we have 1,000 decks of Magic cards to give out to college students. Do you want them? And I was sitting there going, yes. But I was like, my staff probably doesn't want to deal with 1,000 decks of Magic cards, and I went and talked to my staff, and there were 2 of them on staff said, yes, Tyler, but then 3 of them were like, that's for high school students. Our students are not going to engage on that. And going back to them and saying, well, hey, how would you give us 500? And then basically the rumors and winds took off, and that people would be knocking on my door because they heard I had free decks of Magic cards. And so I was talking to students I had never talked to before. Students were coming to programs because RAs were doing programs around Magic the Gathering that had never come to programs in the past. And we were like, ding, 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 we're on to something. All of our programs have targeted the same students, and the same students every year come to these programs. And then these other students out here who are doing their own thing. And they're finding each other. With the internet, they can find each other, but we're not finding them. And so I think for us, that's where it all started. And that just led us to like, okay, let's look at hiring Geek students. And, how do we engage our students on campus who identify this? And, and at first we were like, okay, what about inclusion, right? Like, are they our white, male students? Well, the research we did showed us, and the programs we did showed us, that we had students who were very diverse coming out to our programs. And I think that was for us the first bridge that maybe pop culture and geek culture could bring people together who wouldn't normally come together. I always tell the story of, I did a training at Fresno State, on geek identity, and we had an IT person come, and I had a student panel. I brought 2 or 3 of the geek students living on campus, very diverse. And before the training even started, they just started speaking in a language, the IT guy and the student, that I'd never even heard of. And what they were talking about at the time was Pokemon. And they were talking, and this was before Pokemon Go. And I just sat there and I'm like, I have no idea what the 2 of you are saying, but the 2 of you are connecting on a level that I've never seen before. You as a college student are connected to an IT guy, and this IT guy is connecting to a college. And so for me, that's where the magic happened. And that's where it blew my mind. Is that we have people all across campus who are geeks and identify. And so when you encourage them to be a geek, they get excited. And the only way FresCon happened at Fresno State, going back to that, is we had to get it passed through risk management. What we didn't know when we were trying to get it passed through risk management is that one of the assistant directors was a Trekkie and was part of a Star Trek cosplay group in Fresno that would go down to LA for WonderCon every year. And so we were blown away. And he's like, Tyler, we were so behind the scenes cheering for this to happen. And because we knew that there was concerns about risk management, he's like, we were telling our boss, like, this needs to happen. You don't realize that, right? I'm res life centric. I'm housing centric. I don't ever connect with anybody in risk management. And so we do a panel, and he comes to the panel, and we're talking, and I see him on campus the next week. We have a different relationship. And so for me, I see the power of these passions opening doors for the things that we want to do as higher ed and student affairs folks, which is create an environment where people feel welcome. And it's not just white folks. It's not, it crosses the gamut. And that was what blew me away. When we had a professor of Black studies at Fresno State say, I would love to bring my Black students and do a panel on Black masculinity and sci-fi imagery at FresCon, we're like, hey, that sounds like a great idea. And when a physics professor says, I'd love to do a panel from science fiction to reality, and so somebody says to us, well, how do you collaborate, Tyler? Like, let me tell you about a program in which we had faculty, staff, and students all working together with our dining, right? Because we went to dining and like, hey, you're going to have to open some things up. And they're like, what do you mean? And we're like, we're going to have people come in this weekend that can you open up Starbucks when it's not normally open? We were collaborative and it was just amazing. And then we worked with the community because we were on radio stations because I'm in charge of marketing. So we were on radio stations. We were doing morning talk shows. And we got the community excited. What kind of professional development is that? Right? And so my geek passions have really paid off, and I think for me, what I love is I've mentored and helped other geeks be okay with talking about their identity on their campuses. And so for me, that's where these things all come together. And that's what excites me.
Yeah. That's all really cool stuff. And I mean, we've had some other recent episodes, I guess by the time this posts, I think they should be out just continuing to explore this topic. And just like it cuts across campus, it cuts across kind of backgrounds and, just whatever a person is into. If you can get somebody to have their like kind of passionate affinity be, found in someone else, it opens the doors and obviously they can then kind of build a relationship upon that that's not solely reliant on their interest, but it's just a way to like catalyze so much community and people, ways for people just to have fun together. And, because I was joking in one of the other episodes that, people shouldn't be surprised that, some sort of geeky interest would like pull people out because people wait overnight for like midnight releases. They will like line up for things and like, they really are just so into what they're into. And it's just, still something that's kind of sort of permeating and becoming more mainstream where, other stuff like sports and cars, it's like stuff for those sort of affinities have been happening for a very long time. But, like San Diego Comic-Con just continues to grow. And now there's all these other conventions and, just people want that, like that local community, that national community, that global community that's based on the thing that they love. And they want to cosplay like it. They want to craft things. They want to, just do whatever kind of creative outlet they have to, just really engage on it with other people that are into it too. So, it's really cool to hear just, the experience that you've had and this thing that you helped create continues to live on and help, positively impact the student experience. And, it's bringing staff together to, engage with each other, but also with students that they serve. And, it's really awesome. And, I know there's just been some other campuses that have created like geek weeks and Comic-Cons and stuff on their campuses. It's also like they just have a great space for it. Like they're a community space anyway. So just having that sort of, place for people to come together is it's always awesome.
Like, I don't know if you followed what happened with FanCon in Baltimore. And I just kept thinking, I'm like, if you had just partnered with the University of Maryland, like you would have been able to do that really well. Like we have resources and we have venues that go unused over the weekends on college campuses, right? And that's kind of how we sold it. It was like, we had a student affairs vice president at the time who was like, I want to engage the community. I want to do more things because there were 25,000 students on campus, but only 1,000 lived in the residence halls. And so for us, it was like, hey, we have a way for you to do that. Give us a little bit of a budget, give us some space, and we can make it happen. And so there's all these resources that are untapped that I think in a community could really help bring people together. And to me, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe if it's anything that was, included in that convention just through your own kind of, affinity for it. But I guess it was as we start to wrap up the episode, because we'll try to, if you can send anything, it'd just be cool to include it about like FresCon and that sort of stuff so folks can see it. But what are the things that you like right now are kind of like reading and watching and listening to, anything that you'd want to specifically just have us be able to include in the show notes, whether it is stuff like FresCon that we can share out or, just any other kind of like pieces of content that have grabbed your attention.
Again, with 6 kids, most of it's Paw Patrol, Super Y. Every once in a while, my daughters will be watching, Spy Kids or something like that. So most of my time is with them. I don't get a whole lot of time to kind of do pleasure stuff. I talked about some of that earlier. I think for me, I'm listening to what my kids want, which is, usually a mixture of Toby Mac, Jamie Grace, and Gad Elbaz, as a very eclectic mix. Oh, they also are really into Siegel's Stop It Now, thanks to Crystal Lay, a colleague of mine who introduced us to that. I don't know if you're familiar with bad lip reading, but Siegel's Stop It Now is on constant repeat in our house. In terms of watching, again, I don't get to watch a whole lot, but we're in a very glorious time in our family where I get to introduce my kids to my childhood. So watching movies like E.T. and Karate Kid and Princess Bride, and the next thing I want to introduce them to is Goonies, and some of those things, and getting to watch the Marvel movies, and I those are the things that I'm really excited about. Really towards the future in terms of content, I think a lot of the stuff, in terms of my personal time, is reading up on the field still. There's just so much good stuff coming out about our field. I think definitely on the issues of inclusion, I'm reading a lot of Robin DiAngelo and watching her, and Jamie Washington, and reading Bell Hooks. I think so for me right now, that's what I'm geeking out on in terms of our field.
Yeah. We'll find links to all that stuff so folks can check it out. And we'll wrap up the episode here on the kind of optimistic note. Anything or things that you are looking forward to in your job, life, and or the world?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been spending a lot of time on that question because I'm just finishing up my 2 years of leadership with Bakuho. So there hasn't really been a whole lot of opportunity for me, and so as I look at the next chapter of my life, I think I'm keeping my options open. One of the things that we're doing is I'm launching a new business to really take my 23 years of experience, trainings, resources that I've collected. I'm a pack rat, right? Like I've saved trainings. I have trainings from when I was an RA in 1991 still, so I have a lot of resources and, saved up, and really to bring it into the world, because I've been doing that for free and helping people out. Not that I wouldn't stop doing that, but I think for me, I think I've got a lot to offer. And so I've really started doing that, and really working as an inclusion coach as part of this. I've had a lot of opportunity engaging other white folks on issues of equity and inclusion, especially on social media. There's a lot of times where I'll engage on Facebook or Twitter, and then people will direct message me because they want to talk more. And so I think that's leading me to really look at that. So I'm starting this new website called 3dimensionalleadership.org. And so for me, that's really one of the things that I'm really doing. Because again, I think in terms of inclusion coaching, like I don't, it's not about creating a safe space for white folks. It's really creating a workout partner. The idea for me is when you go to the gym, going alone is different than when you go with somebody else to really work through some of these issues. And really, I just think taking undue burden off of marginalized folks to do the work. Because again, at the end of the day, as a white cisgender heterosexual male with a lot of privilege, I get to be really authentic without much consequence. And so I really want to help with the labor. And one of the unique things I'm going to be doing really to decolonize our field is donating a portion of the proceeds of my work to pay the professionals of color who really built into my life and taught me what I know. So, folks like CJ Venable and Nick Thwart and Jamila Jones and Dr. Jonathan Higgins, folks who were not getting paid to help me, but were helping me because of my relationship with them. And I mention those names because people have to understand I didn't get here because I figured all this out and I'm some super, white superhero. It's really because I listened and made mistakes and learned. And so I think for me, part of my mission isn't just to make money to put food on the table for my family. I got 6 kids to feed, and higher ed student affairs does not necessarily do that. But at the same time, I also want to recognize that as a field, we have gained a lot of knowledge off of folks who didn't get paid to help us that. So I think for me, that's one of the things to do that, and to be very transparent. So I think once I start really bringing, getting gigs, I guess, for lack of a better word, is to be very transparent on my website. Like, this is how much money I've brought in, and this is where I've donated it to. And these are some of the folks that I've donated it to. So if you want to ask, you could check in with them and say, is Tyler really doing this? Because it's one thing for me to say it, but it's another thing for me to be accountable for it. I think that's one of the things I'm doing. And as part of that whole three-dimensional leadership thing is really working on a three-dimensional model of leadership, how social media virtual relationships look different than face-to-face, relationships. And that, for me, the idea is a leader is at their best when they can engage as a leader face-to-face, when they can engage as a leader in social media and digital spaces, and they can integrate the two and know when to integrate, in terms of when to engage in one or the other. So I think that's another area that I'm really excited about for the future. I'm also, again, working on research, and again, in partnership with others. I'm looking at the current research of Generation Z, and I'm really focusing in on how 9/11, September 11th, shaped this current generation. I really think Generation Z is a lazy name. No offense to those people who worked and gave them that name, but as a Gen Xer, it's like, okay, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, like, come on, can we be a little more creative? I really believe that they're the 911 generation. I think that's much more apropos of this Generation Z. I think the research is right on that's coming out about them, but I think looking at the impact of September 11th, 2001, because these students today were 2, 3, 4 years old at the time that happened. And what happened on September 11th is parents' paradigm shifted. And so these students grew up with a different parental model than I think the parents before them. And so I think we're really seeing that. So I'm really looking at the impact of that. I may or may not be working on a book, and hopefully this will kind of cement, if somebody says, well, you stole that, Tyler, like, hey, I was talking about that back then, but really looking at the 911 generation, which again, in terms of, safety and things like that, when we look at, the lack of creativity, even calling it Gen Z, maybe we need to blame the baby boomers in power about that. Like maybe they don't have the creativity to come up with these new names. Again, no offense to the baby boomers out there, but as a Gen Xer, we're kind of caught in the middle here. But that also might explain why we've seen an incredible amount of reboots in Hollywood, wouldn't it? Shade, no shade.
Yeah.
So
That's a good
again,
one.
I think for me, I think that's really what I'm looking for the future. I think, again, my hope comes back squarely to the professionals I get to mentor, engage, like yourself and others, and my own children. I get a glimpse of the future, and again, although the power structures today might be holding back a little bit progress in terms of keeping their own comfort, I think there's a bright future ahead. I'm excited. I think at the end of the day, 10, 15, 20 years from now, we're going to be taken off and there's going to be some amazing stuff happening. I think, honestly, if me and folks around my age and older can just get out of the way, I think you're going to see some amazing stuff happen. So that's kind of my future, kind of what I'm looking for. But I'm excited. If you can't tell, I'm excited. I love the work we do. I love the work you're doing. Again, I think podcasts are a new kind of, it's like we got rid of talk radio and now we're getting to do kind of the talk radio we want to do. And I think it really puts the power back in the hands of the people who are at the front lines doing and have the best data in terms of content. So this stuff just all excites me.
Yeah. And I think, it's just really cool to see more and more people kind of trying to chart their own path and utilize their knowledge and experiences to help other people. And it's just, I wish more people, because I think people can struggle with problems and not seek out help. And I think there's a lot of people like you that are willing to give, kind of their kind of advice and perspective through what they've learned and all the resources that they've gathered. So, it's neat to see, more and more people trying to, kind of go out there and do good work. So,
yeah. And one more thing, Dustin, again, I think I think for me, I'm open. And if anybody's listening out there, right, I am very much interested in being a leader and a director of housing somewhere. Like, I think for me, it's my time and I'm ready. And, I would put that out there. Like, if people are like, oh, well, Tyler is, he wants to go do this big old business thing. I think at the end of the day, though, I think I like the idea of having a team of folks. I like the idea of leading, being strategic and things like that. So that, I'm keeping my options open out there is really, I think, my paradigm. So I want to put that out there.
Yeah, because I think, a lot of people, when they do these, like, what are you looking forward to? It is almost like these aspirations that are now recorded for posterity. So it's like, I would like to do this. And I think, like, these are the things that kind of keep me honest. But because, I think that's the other thing, too, is that, like, again, people who have their own ventures, it's like, okay, this doesn't have to ever, like, exist on its own and be, sort of your only gainful employment. It's like, you just want to sort of formally offer yourself up to, assist people in a, particular capacity and, still have your day job kind of thing that might help to continue to inspire you and equip you to be able to help other people better.
Right.
So,
because I think that just plays into my family, right? If I don't want to be on the road every day, I'm looking maybe 10 times a year going out, as kind of a side thing. I want a stable environment in which I don't want to sacrifice my family. They come first, which is why, like, the director role, I think for me would provide much more of that stability and connection home. And I think that's one of the things as a parent in this field, which I think is also is sort of unique. I don't know how many higher ed folks have 6 kids, ages, 0 to 10, but I think for me that's an honest thing that I don't want to become a full-time speaker.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough gig. So, it's good to have that, self-awareness of what, sort of balance and harmony looks like for you. And, it's all good stuff that we've talked about here. We'll link out to everything in the show notes. And, just really appreciate your time, Tyler. And, I wish you the best of luck, just kind of charting out this path and continuing to do the good work that you do with Geek Ed and everything else. And again, just appreciate your time, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Dustin. Appreciate it.
This podcast is a proud member of the ConnectEDU Podcast Network, bringing together diverse voices and thoughtful discussions to the higher ed community. Check us out online at connectedu.network or on Twitter at ConnectEDUPod. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. Please rate, review, and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.